Recording in progress.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about how to create components using class. So, we discussed about class components. And one more point we need to understand state in class component. One more point, we will see how to handle the state in class component. So, what about state in class component? You don't need to explicitly import any hook for creating a state. Here, hooks are not possible. Then how do we design? So what is the point here is state is defined for a component implicitly, right? We discussed this. State is defined implicitly for a component. Implicitly. So state is defined for a component implicitly. So you can define state. You can define state in component constructor. You can define state in component constructor. So why to define state in component constructor is so it must be initialized. It must be initialized before the component mounts. It must be initialized before the component mounts. Before the component mounts, you should initialize it. So generally, syntax I showed you in constructor, we need to call the super constructor. After that, this dot state is an object. So with a key and a value. Object with key and value. State is technically state is an object type with the key and value reference. So configure state using this dot state. Access state using same this dot state dot key. And assign values into state by using, we have this dot set state method by using set state method. Generally, when you import a state using a hook, we have to create the getter and setter. Here you have built-in getter and setter. So by default, there is a setter method called set state. We can use that set state method to assign. So we can configure the state, and there is no limit already. We yesterday saw in a state you can store any kind of data, that is primitive, non-primitive, any type of data. But what is the key point here? You don't have use state hook. You have to configure the state implicitly. That is the reason. So class components are also known as stateful components. Stateful components because explicitly you don't need to create a state. Implicitly they have a state. So note here is class components are often known as stateful components as they have implicit state. Class components are often known as stateful components as they have implicit state. So that is stateful components. So yesterday I showed you one example here. In this example, we are configuring state in the constructor. And order dependency is also very important. Before you configure the state, make sure that you import the super constructor because the state is provided by the component base class. You cannot access the members of that base class without calling its constructor. First, you have to call the constructor. Then it will work. Now, this is okay. We are storing the data and we are accessing the data and using it. Storing the data using state and accessing the data with the reference of that state. Now, here in class components, this example already I showed. Yesterday given this example, but one more time just I am giving product dot JSX. This example already I given yesterday. Just one more explanation I given here. So one more point now is how you define a mount phase. Generally, how you configure the mount phase of component here. So, why you need that? Because at the time of loading component, you want any actions to perform, then usually we give these actions to the mount phase. How do you use a mount phase? Here, we don't have any use effect. So, mount and unmount in class component. So mount and unmount in class component, So this is next thing you need to know. So class component uses the following life cycle hooks. Actually, life cycle hooks means here they are methods. Uses life cycle hooks to handle mount and unmount phase. So it have component did mount and the component will mount, and we have component will unmount. These are the methods. So some of these methods are outdated. Actually, class itself is outdated. Class components are outdated. So will mount is before mounting. Did mount is after mount, means mount phase. Later in another session, I will explain life cycle. When we learn life cycle, you will understand various more phases of component, class component. So here you cannot use effects. You cannot use effects. So what you have to do, you have to depend on these methods. For example, here we are having uh, these details. Already state have a product name, and product name is some Samsung TV, and we are displaying that here. So we have to write a mount phase. Then we are using here component did mount. Component did mount is a method. In a class, we know how to write methods. Directly we write a method in here. And here this dot, so we have a set state method. Set state is a method. In that we need to define state. State is actually an object. In the state object, what properties we are having? We are having a product name property we are having. And what is the value? Some Samsung LED TV. So that is some value we give it. By using set state, we are defining that. And here we configured that set state and defining that set state. So it changes the value and essence. So already it is initialized as Samsung TV and we are assigning a new value. We want to change the rating. Then what we need to do? We need to set what? Rating. Rating have a rate. Rate have a 4.9 something. That means we need to set the state. So it will set the state in that way. You want certain actions to perform at the time of mounting, then you can define that in component did mount. Component here we don't have use effect. We cannot use those hooks. So we have to use component did mount. So on component mount, if you want any action, then you can define did mount and you can specify the actions here. So what we need to do, so syntactically, so we need to define component did mount. And here this dot set state. State is an object where we have to define the key and the value. So the value that you want to initialize, assign. Already state is initialized, you want to assign anything. So here, one question regularly for experienced people is actually, so why cannot I set state in the constructor itself? So that means I'm writing here set state, this dot set state. I remove that. Then usually we will have the previous values. And I am trying to set state in the constructor. Because constructor defines actions to perform at the time of creating object before mount. Before mount itself, it will define the functionality. Then you see that those new values here. So whatever I defined, they are not assigned. That means whatever the new values you configured, they are not assigned. That means we are unable to set this here. So you see in the inspect, when we go to console, in the console, one problem is there. Here it is not showing a problem, but one problem is, so cannot call set state on a component that is not yet mounted. That means state can be assigned with a new value only at the time of mounting or after mounting. That is the basic rule. So if you try to set state before the state is class is mounted, then it is unable to manage. So here, so what is the basic rule? So another note is you can set state only after component mount or during mount. You can set state only after component mount or during mount. You cannot assign a value into state. You cannot assign value into state for a component which is not yet mounted, which is not yet mounted. So whenever you want to define set state, make sure that you configure that during the mount or after the mount. After the mount means while working with some events, we do that. Button click, change, some events we define that. Okay. So two important points are clear. So in function components, how to declare a state, how to store the data, how to access, and how to manage mount phase. Here also, same concept we learned, but different approach. So here, class components, we are able to create a state, store data in the state, assign values into the state, access them and use them. But approach is different. So approach is different. We need set state, there we need use state, right? Next, what about the concept of style binding, class binding, event binding like concept? Style, class binding are same. There is no change. There is no change in style and class binding. So that means style and class binding. Class binding. So the techniques, the technique of binding styles, the technique of binding styles and classes dynamically, similar to function component, similar to function component. However, the values are dynamically accessed using state of class component. The values are dynamically accessed using state of class component. So style binding, class binding are same. There is no change in that. That means you learned how to write the styles and bind the styles. You learned how to write the classes and bind the classes. Same concept here also. That means, for example, I want to write some styles and we need to configure that. Okay. So here I will copy this example. This is for mount phase product.jsx. Okay. Now style binding, class binding, actually what you do, suppose let's say we have state. Just remove all this content. Now we want to apply some styles to this heading. We want to apply some styles to that heading. Then in the state, we created a style object. Style object. In that object, we are defining the style. And how to write the styles, we know. Camel case, we discussed that we write in camel case attributes. So background, what it is, color. So background color, some yellow. So we have color, some red. So now this I want to apply to that heading. Then how do we apply to the heading? So heading uses a style attribute property. And here we have to access this dot state dot what style object. Then it is going to apply the style. Same thing. So you want to apply a class here. So here we want to apply a class. I'm using again a align. And align is using text center. That is a class. P2 padding 2. Now we want to apply this class. These are class names. Then you know we have to use an class name. and dynamically it will come from this dot state dot align, which is using certain classes it will apply. It's the same concept. Binding styles, binding classes are same. There is no much difference. Only the point here we use class related state for dealing with that. So there is no much change here. So syntactically we need to define this dot state and here style object. So background color, color red. We have like align, text center like this. Now to any element, if you want to apply by using style attribute, this dot state dot style object, class name, this dot style dot align. That's how we do. So there is no much change in style binding and class binding. Style and class binding concepts are same. So there is no much point to concentrate here. We can simply use them as we done in our general function component. Now here, event binding. Event binding. Remember, we are recalling the same topics, but in a class component. What is difference? Generally, in event binding, so what is an event in our function components? What is the point about event is? In a function components, event uses concept is same, delegate mechanism. It points towards a function, but here we can't have functions. A class cannot have a function as class member. Then how to write event related actions? Now here we don't use functions, we use methods. That means here we cannot have functions, then we use methods. So here some more important points are there. We'll see that. First concept here is event event handling in class component. Event handling in class component is similar to function component. So all synthetic events are similar to function component. All synthetic events are similar to function components. Only the point is event in class component points towards a method in class. Points towards a method in class. Point towards a method in class. So generally what we need to do, we need to write a method. So usually methods are directly written. Methods we write like handle, insert, click. This is a method. And this insert click is a method in a class. And a button have to use that insert click. That means what is the synthetic event on click? Already we learned all synthetic events are same. So what is a synthetic event? Already we discussed. What is synthetic event? Synthetic event is the base for the virtual DOM events. All virtual DOM events are derived from a base class. What is that base class? Synthetic event. Synthetic event is the base. On click, how you access the method? This dot handle insert click, because it is a method in a class. That is one important difference you will find. Function we directly access, but you know that any member of a class is accessed by using this keyword. If it is a method or a property, we have to access using this keyword. One change you will find is you will not write a function, you will write a method, because functions are not possible in class as class member. And you point towards use. I'm keeping a button here. So this is insert button. I want some action to perform on insert. Then what we do is we will write a method handle insert click. That is the method we are having. Now okay, on this button click, because it is a method in a class, methods are accessed by using this. So earlier we used to write a function and we need to point towards the function. But now we write a method and we point towards it. Okay, so let's continue. Now check, is it audible to everyone? Online people, is it okay now? Is it audible to everyone? Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So here, so what we are doing in this example is we are designing a method, and on button click, we are pointing towards the method and defining a functionality. And what is the functionality here? What actions state? That means currently it is doing some DOM manipulation. DOM manipulation means what? It is using alert, it is using confirm, or it is using console log, it is using document write. It's fine, no problem. Problem. So let's see. Currently it is okay because I click on insert, it is showing an alert, record inserted. I want to display the message here. That means in the page, I want to display the message. So I will declare a state. This dot state is an object. In that object, we have a MSG. MSG is empty string. Now what we do, we will display that MSG below in a paragraph. How to access this dot state dot MSG? It is an empty string. On button click, I need to use it. On button click, I need to define the functionality. Means I need to set state. This dot what? Set state. Set state is an object. In that, what to set? MSG. MSG, what is the message? Record inserted. That is the message we need to set. Now see what happens here. So this is the button. When I click the button, it is showing some error. And remember, if I am not using this set state, I am just using an alert, say hi, something. I'm using just an alert, some DOM related method. It is okay. But if I am doing some state related any interaction here, any state related interaction here, it is unable to manage. That means when you click, now it shows error. Now the reason is, now the question here is why? Why an event that you return is unable to use the state? Right? It is unable to use the state. So it is saying that I can't set state. So why? Because now tell me the order. So when state is created, when component is created, when component is created, the state is created. When event is created, when event is created after the component mounted, after the component is mounted, the event is created. That means event is designed. Event is loaded into memory, and event is after the state completed. The event is designed. Now event is trying to use the state, and the state can be provided only to the methods. It can be provided only to the methods which are designed in equivalent phase, which are designed in equivalent phase. That means what React is saying, that your event is not recognized by state. your event is not recognized by state because state is created before event is created, and after state is created, when your event is created, it is unable to use the state. That means it is saying that at the time of creating the state, it is unable to find this. Of course, it is unable to find that because it is not created before state, it is created after state. So state says that I can provide the state only to the methods which are created while creating the state, which are created while creating the state. How it is possible? After creating state only methods can be created. Then what we have to do is, remember, this is not required if your method event is not using a state. If your event is not using a state, it is not required because it is working now. Alert I used, it is working. When it is using state, this problem comes. Now what we have to do is, we have to register this method at the time of constructing itself. The event methods are registered after the state is created. No, at the time of creating the state, methods also should be registered. Then methods can use state. That means what is the problem? Methods are unable to use state because methods are registered after the state is created. If methods are also registered at the time of creating state, then only they can use the state. That is a basic rule. That is the basic rule. That means here, what is the problem in the state concept while working with the state concept here? So an important note. So here, event method cannot use state of class. Event method cannot use state of class directly. Class directly. So you have to register the event method. You have to register the event method while creating state. You have to register the event method while creating state. So this requires bind method that binds event to current component class memory. Events to the current component class memory so that it can use the state defined in memory. So that it can use the state defined in memory. So what is the problem? That means actually this is same like, I will tell you one concept. Suppose, you know, in your computer, you install some software. After installing the software, you finished installing the software. After installing the software, it is not ready to use. That means some softwares, after you install, they are not ready to use. You have to restart your device. I hope you have seen so many softwares asking for restart the PC after installing. If I successfully finished installing, why I cannot use? Why I need to restart? Have you observed this process? When you install some software, it will ask you to restart. Without restarting, you are unable to use it. If I installed successfully, then why I need to restart? Why I am unable to use it? Because when you install a software, all the files are copied. But to make that software work, that software must be registered with your operating system registry. Your operating system have a registry. So, actually registry editor, REG edit. REG edit you have to run in your PC. This is an registry editor. So you should not do that regularly, but this is registry editor. This registry editor allows you to control all the softwares that you have in your PC. That means all the software related keys, references, everything will be in this registry. That means remember, a software is not ready to use until or unless it is registered in the registry. And many softwares cannot register into registry because registry will not allow. So after the operating system loaded, you have to register before it loaded. Before it loaded, how? Before it loaded means when you turn on the computer. So after you turn on till it get ready, what is that phase known as? After you turn on your PC till it gets ready, what is the phase known as? That phase is known as booting. We call that phase as booting. What do you say? Computer loading? No, we say computer booting. It boots. At the time of booting, the new files that you installed, they will be copied into the registry. Now the software is ready to use. The same mechanism is working here also. What happened? You created a state. After creating the state, you have an event. Now this event is unable to use the state because it is created after the state. So event is unable to use the state. Then what we have to do? We have to register this event into the memory of state. Then it can use it. How to register that? How do you register that? For that, what you have to do is, which method to be registered? Handle click. Registering is nothing but binding to the current class memory. You have to bind to the current class memory. How we do that? In the constructor, this dot handle insert click is equal to this dot handle insert click dot bind with this. This indicates current memory. That means now what this bind method will do is, bind method is going to bind this method with the current class constructor, means current class memory. If it is binded with current class memory, it can use this state. Otherwise, it cannot use the state. After binding, how to access that method? The binded method is accessed by using which reference? Handle click. Handle click. That is the reference. After binding, we have to access it. We have to access with this reference. That is the reference we are using here. That means now what happens here is now, so when you are dealing with insert, it should able to do. Remember, this is not required if your event is not using any state. For example, I have another button and this button is delete and on click. So here we are using this dot handle delete click. We will create it. Class is BTN danger and margin top 3. Okay. Now here we will write a method handle delete click. What this have to do? Alert deleted. This is the message. Now you don't need to register this delete inside constructor. Why don't you need to do that? Because it is not using the state. So if you're not using the state, no problem. That means you see delete, it is working fine. But if it is trying to use the state now, that means you see it is trying to use this dot what? Set state. So it should set message. Message is what? Record deleted successfully. This message we are defining. Then what happens? You can see that when I click on delete, insert is working fine. But when I click on delete, it's unable to use. Then we have to make sure that we have registered with the current memory. How you register with the current memory? This dot what? Handle delete click. This dot what? Handle delete click bind. Bind with what? This. Now you can see that it is able to do that. It is able to do. So if events are trying to use the state, then this is the biggest problem you have to face. And it is important to bind. That is very, very important. So what you need to bind? So syntactically here. So in the constructor, so we have a super. Here we have a state. So here we are having this dot. This dot handle insert click is equal to this dot handle insert click dot bind with this. So binding with the current class memory is very important. So if it is not binded with the current class memory, it is unable to use it. It is unable to use. So here I will give example product.jsx. Let me copy this. Okay. Now here one more concept is, one more point here is delete click. I am not binding. Here in the constructor, we are not binding. So if I am not binding, obviously it will get an error. So it shows an error. So insert is working fine, but delete is not. Now what I am doing here, I am trying to bind. I am trying to bind directly with this here. I'm using the bind method directly in the event handler. Now, when I do this, delete is working fine. That means you don't need to bind in the constructor. So instead of binding in the constructor, this bind method allows you to bind in the handler itself. in the handler. Now, what is difference? What is difference is registering all methods in the constructor before we use is good if you are sure that all methods are used regularly. If you are not sure about all the methods used regularly, you want to load the method only when it is used, then you can use this technique. What is this technique? This is binding to the memory only when it is clicked. Previously, what it is doing, it is already binding and keeping in the memory. Even you don't click, the bind is ready. That means it is registering a method before you click the method, before you trigger it. Now what happening? It is registering only when you trigger it. That depends. We use both situations. We are sure that all the methods are used. Then what we do, we directly put them in the constructor. So we are not sure that they will not use all the methods. They will use only one or two. Then we will write like this. We will write like this. Anything is okay. So that means what you can do is you can register. You can register. Here another point is you can. So you can register the event method with current class memory. Current class memory directly from event handler. This allows to register the method. This allows to register the method only when it is used. Register the method only when it is used. So here, first point, registering all methods in constructor. This resembles what? Lazy loading. This is eager loading. We call this mechanism eager loading. Register only when it is used. Register only when it is used. This is called as lazy loading. Lazy loading means an instance is created only when it is required. It is not created if it is not required. So syntactically, you can define like this: button on click. So this dot handle insert click dot bind with this. This is event. So event related one major change you will find here about this concept. In function components, there is no restriction, right? You can directly write the event, you can access the event. Even if it is using state, it doesn't matter. So, but in class components, especially when you are configuring the state, when you are dealing with the state, so configuring and dealing with the state requires this bind mechanism. Now, one more question asked in interview is, can't you bind without bind? How to use the memory of a method or a class or a function, so without the bind method? Actually, already you learned in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, you learned the concept here. I told you in while working with functions. That means what you know here, we have a function. Function is having some add a comma b. So here return a plus b. Now the concept here is, what is the meaning of return? Why a function needs a return? So why a function needs a return? Generally, you have answer like to return a value. How it returns a value? Return is a jump statement. What kind of statement return is? Jump statement, break, return, continue. These are jump statements. Then how you say that return is returning value? It is jump. So actually, that means, see, if anyone asks a question in interview like print, it is a void function. It is a void function. Can a void function have return keyword? Yes, we can have. That means document. Suppose I am saying document dot write, document dot write. Suppose statement one. So after that, document dot write statement 2, 3, 4 like this. So we are printing the statements. That means print is going to print all the statements. It is going to print all the statements. So this is a void method. If anybody asks, can a void method have a return keyword? See, it can have a return, no problem. It can have a return, but what is the purpose of return? Whatever you write after return is not reachable to compiler. Is not reachable to compiler. That means it will execute only 1 and 2. So return is a jump statement. So return is not for returning a value. It is not for returning a value. Then technically what it is, let's see one concept here. Technically what it is, for example, so what is happening in this area? So what is happening is, you have a function called add. That means first step, what happens? A memory is allocated for add. In this memory, it is storing A and B, right? Generally, what happens is, this indicates the allocation of memory. This indicates the destroying of memory. That indicates the destroying of memory. That means you delete the memory. What is meant by void means allocate memory and don't return that memory once the function is completed. That means deallocate the memory, destroy the memory allocated. Void means what? Void means what? Not returning anything. Not returning anything means what? It is not returning any memory. It is cleaning up memory. That means what void is doing? It is going to remove that memory. Now what you have done, you used a return keyword. You used a return keyword. Return is a jump statement. Now what happens? Right side, left side presiding, na? Right, left presiding. So memory is allocated for whom? Memory is allocated for add. After memory allocated, it comes here. What happens? A plus B addition will happen. After addition happens, now this is a jump statement. Jump statement means it terminates the function. It terminates a function before the memory ends. It terminates a function before the memory ends. Then what happens to the memory? Memory, before the memory ends, you are terminating means memory is still alive. That means the memory allocated for add is still alive because you are not allowing to go here. Because what is written? Written means stop, jump. Then what happens? The memory allocated for add is not destroyed. It is still available. It is still available. Then what happens? The result of a plus b can be stored here. The result of a plus b can be stored in the function memory. The memory allocated for function is continuing. It is not destroyed. Void means what? It is destroying the memory allocated for the function. But return, when you use return, you are continuing the memory even the function is completed. Then now function memory, function will act as two things. It will act as a function. It will act as a variable. That means the result of a plus b is stored in add. That means add equal to what? A plus b. The result of a plus b is now stored in this add memory. Then what happens now? I'm using document.write addition. Addition is equal to, so I'm accessing add. Into that I am passing 40 and 20. So what will happen now? This 40 and 20 are passed here. After that, it will perform addition. After performing addition, memory is not erased. The memory is kept alive. And in that memory, this result is stored. Because return will not allow to reach here. If return is not allowing to reach here, that function memory is still alive. So what general people think about this? General people means you learners, what you think is returning a value. So if an experienced person asks you a question, how you say that return jump statement is returning a value? How you will justify this? How you will say that jump statement returning a value? That is completely contradictory. That means you are saying jump statement is returning value. Jump statement is to terminate. That means is it a statement to return values? It is not a statement to return values. It is a jump statement. That means it is terminating the function before the memory is erased. So the function memory is alive. So that we can use that memory and handle it. That means you see the result of 40 plus 20 will be stored in which memory? Add. Add is used as a variable now. So that you can see that the result of a plus b will come here. That is the concept. That means now once you know this trick, that when you keep the memory alive, so before it is destroyed, right? Then you can use that memory across any number of requests. Across any number of requests. This is the trick now we need to apply here. That means if anybody asks you, like without bind, how you can bind? That means suppose I will use another button. This button on click, I will keep as this dot. So handle update click, and here we have a class name btn and btn some warning and margin top 3, and this is update. Now what we do here is some mx is 2. So that is 2. Okay. Now you can see we have these buttons there. Now on this update button click, I need to define some functionality like, so we say handle update click. On update click, this dot what? Set state, it will use msg message, what is it? Record updated. That's the message. Oh, that is the message. And however, you know that this is working fine. This is working fine, but this fails. because you need to bind. Now see what we are doing here is here we are writing in a function which returns this dot handle update click. This dot handle update click. We are using this technique. And when you are using this technique, update will work. We are not using a bind method. Now tell me what is the concept without bind, how it is using. Because what this indicates, it indicates return. It indicates return. Return indicates that you are returning the memory of this particular function without destroying the memory. That means it can use the memory of current class. Previously, what is happening? Method memories are being destroyed after the method is completed. So you have to bind them into the constructor, into the class memory. But now what happens? The memory allocated for the method is not destroyed after the method is completed, because return indicates that keep the memory alive. If that memory is alive, then class can use that memory. Class can access and use the memory. Then you don't need to use a bind method. But this is not good every time. This is not good every time because you are keeping several memory alive without destroying them. Obviously, memory will overload. Memory will overload. Once you finish the functionality, destroy the memory. Then when to use this kind of memory? When you need continuously repeated operations. Repeatedly, you will do the operation again and again. Then better go with what? This technique. If you are doing any operation only once, you are not repeatedly doing that operation, then you use the bind mechanism. If you are repeatedly doing the actions, then you better use this technique. Without bind also you can manage. But when to use this, that is very important. You cannot do this every time. Why we cannot do this every time? Because it overloads the memory. It overloads the memory. So if you see the projects previously, means currently nobody is using them. Currently nobody, modern React means nobody is using classes. But previously when you see the projects, 95% you will see all events registered inside the constructor. Inside the constructor, 90%. Everything is registered inside constructor because they want all the events to get ready and start using the memory before they start using them. That's the reason they register everything in the constructor. But this is very important approach. Now, why I explained that return? Because you need to understand what is return means. Return means it is not returning a value. What is returning? What value it is returning now? It is not returning any value. That means here what return is doing, it is the keeping the memory of that particular method alive even when the method is completed. So that class can use the memory, class members can use the memory, state also can use that memory. That is the intention actually. That means if anyone asks like, so the question in interviews about this is, FAQ is, so how to use state without using the bind method for event handler, without using the bind method in event handler. Answer. So you can configure, you can configure event handler that returns method memory so that the memory is alive and is and available available across multiple requests. available across multiple requests. So syntactically, button on click. This dot handle some insert click. And without the bind method, we can do that. Right. Now this is how we manage. So style binding, class binding, event binding, and now you know data binding. So data binding is nothing but accessing the data and binding the data into the UI. I will show one example how it works, right? Now we need to understand here how about so the API requests and how about the forms. These are the concepts you learned. API request, which one you use? Axios. Is it possible to use Axios here? You saw Axios. Is it possible to use Axios here? You can use, no problem. Because Axios is not using any hooks. Axios is providing just methods. We can use them in here. We can use those methods. It is providing some functions. Can we call functions in a class? Yes, we can call functions in a class. Functions cannot be class member, but in a class you can have a function. It's possible. Formic, formic, can you use formic? You can't use formic. We cannot use formic because formic users use formic hook. Hooks are not allowed. Hooks are not allowed. Even hook form is not allowed. Then how do you design forms in class component? Actually, you remembered without using use formic hook, we designed form. You remember, I told you about formic component, form component, field component, error message component. Am I right? So here, do I need to use any use formic? I don't need to use any use formic. Directly formic contains initial values. Formic contains directly on submit. That means you can use formic, but not directly using use formic hook. You have to use that by using these components. You can use components. So we will see how to handle API requests, how to handle forms, and how to handle two-way binding. Two-way binding in class components. That we'll see tomorrow. Then tomorrow we can finish the concept of class components. And here also you will have more. In class also you have properties. Properties means controlled, uncontrolled, how to handle them. This all we will see the difference. Once you are good with this, now we will start learning about TypeScript. That means now what we will do, we will shift from JavaScript to TypeScript. Now we will learn how to build the React application with TypeScript. All our projects, we will do two projects, one with JavaScript, another with TypeScript. Once we know this, we can do that. TypeScript, complete language you have to learn. So I have to give you a complete idea about TypeScript. Because JavaScript you already know, but TypeScript is new. So we will learn TypeScript language, then use it in React. That we'll see in next sessions. Okay, right. Tomorrow we'll continue.